You want to just say what you just told me right before we went live right here? It's just so much.
There's so much. There's just so much. We were. I was like, Dan, how are you starting this? And he goes, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot. We'll just dive in. I'm like, yeah, there's just so much.
Yeah, we'll try to do our best in terms of ranking the most important signings that have occurred over the last couple days. And it's kind of funny because the actual new league year has never or has not yet begun, but that's how it works every year. There's that 2-day window before the new league year actually begins, which is on Wednesday, tomorrow afternoon. Officially when these deals can be set in stone, signed, dotted line, all of that stuff. But this 2-day window is where all the conversations, all the reports, and everything come out. It is worth noting, Mark, before we dive in, that it's happened in the past where at the 11th hour, before the actual pen hits the paper, players do an about face and have a different contract in place elsewhere. It's very rare. It doesn't happen with the big reports that we usually have seen, but it does happen. I think Will Lutz, the kicker last year, was like one that happened where he had a deal in place somewhere and then went elsewhere when the new league year began. So just something to keep in mind as we pour through, but these are about 99% sure things as we launch ourselves into this March window in the NFL. So without further ado, let's dive in. The free agency frenzy has officially begun. Before we can even get into yesterday and today's craziness, we actually got to go back to the weekend, even a little bit before, when a couple big notable things happened. I guess we'll start with a real quick note. Dak Prescott restructured his contract, so the Cowboys ended up freeing up $36 million more with that restructure, which is then interesting to see, given that the moves they made over the last 2 days was pretty much non-existent. So we'll see what happens with that moving forward. Max Crosby, though, kind of started the edge rusher market with a 3-year, $106 million extension, 91.5 of it guaranteed. Kind of a no-brainer thing for the Raiders, even though I guess they could have tried to get something for him and continue to stockpile, but it makes sense to lock up a cornerstone of your franchise. And they did it early enough, which is what I wanted the Steelers to do, so that you don't have to pay your guy what Myles Garrett got, what Mike Parsons probably will get, what TJ Watt will get. It was smart for them to kind of, help him set the market there.
There's a theme we're going to talk about with paying guys early, because I think Josh Allen, it's the same type of thing. When we get to that, I'll say this about Max Crosby. Everything the Raiders have done, and we'll talk about Geno here in a little bit, they're doing what I think is really, really smart. They know that Tom Brady's not a dumb guy. I'm sure he's sitting with Mark Davis saying, listen, we cannot win a Super Bowl in the next 3 years. It's just not going to happen. Look at the AFC. Look at our own division. Let alone our own conference, let alone then the beasts that come out of the NFC that you're going to have to play in the Super Bowl. But let us figure out a way to right this ship and become competitive for the next 3 years. So we are flirting with the playoffs, or maybe sneaking into the playoffs. And so then when other teams that are at their peaks start to fall, we're in a really good position to rise up. And that's part of doing that and being a quality football team for the next 3 years. I know it's not sexy, but part of that is keeping a guy like Max Crosby. And I think it's great. Max Crosby is going to, now kind of a Raider for life type of thing. Doesn't have to worry about the money, and you're getting him still paying while he's still in his prime. You're not paying for years of previous service. You're paying for years of continued service. Maybe by that third year, injuries add up, age adds up, but you're still getting an elite top 5 pass rusher over the next 2 years when he's in his prime, and you've locked him up to your team.
And at one of those positions that, is among the most important in the league, in this division, when you got to go against Justin Herbert, Pat Mahomes. If you're the Raiders and you want to at least be competitive and start that road, having a guy like Max Crosby on your team can certainly help go a long way towards at least putting you in position and start to get in contention as the other pieces fall together. So that kind of, obviously set the market for a couple days. But then Myles Garrett, who was adamant about leaving Cleveland and that it was about seeking a championship and going to the right fit.
He can buy himself a championship.
Right place. Decided that, you know what, actually 4 years, $160 million, $40 million per sounds about right for me to return to Cleveland. And little did we know that he really just wanted them to have a franchise quarterback, and they got that in trading for Kenny Pickett. So now we are set to go in Cleveland. But yeah, the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history goes to Myles Garrett. Now we're going to see what happens with TJ Watt, Micah Parsons. Are they going to have to reset the market once again? We shall see. But for the Browns, it made, I guess, some sense. Look, you paid all that money to Deshaun, so you might as well put your money where your mouth is and actually pay a player that's producing for you on the field. And, that's a hard player to part with for sure. So that makes a lot of sense from Cleveland's perspective. But it was funny to see Myles Garrett have all of these contingencies and requests and say, actually, it was about the money after all.
But you know what? I think it's a smart play by Myles Garrett, because the worst thing that happened is he would have ended up on a contender. And the best thing that happened with an extension, and the best thing that happened is he becomes the highest paid non-quarterback until Jamar Chase gets a deal. Which, shame on the Bengals. They should have paid. If they would have paid Chase last year before Jefferson, they'd be saving almost now $10 million a year.
I know.
It's crazy. You got to pay.
You can't drag your feet in this league, man.
You've got to,
especially with the cap going up so much.
Well, that was like the Jalen Johnson deal. You see the cornerback deals now. Jalen Johnson, I'm looking at that. I'm like, dude, he's like the 7th now highest paid corner. It's a steal. It's just crazy. It hurts in the moment, but if you identify talent in your team, pay it. So I think this is a smart move by Cleveland in the same way I think it's a smart move by the Raiders, because, again, cornerstone piece, you still just need that presence in your organization. He is a guy like Joe Thomas, like Max Crosby will be, like a Calvin Johnson was for the Lions, a down-run franchise, but an all-time great talent. And in the NFL, it's not the NBA. The NBA is about, do you have a ring and multiple rings? Now we can talk about the GOAT conversation. The NFL, we don't care that Walter Payton only has one ring. We don't care that Barry Sanders doesn't have a ring. They're the 1 and 2 with Jim Brown, best running backs in NFL history. You know what I mean? Yeah. We care the
Lawrence Taylor's got a ring,
but we don't care with all the other positions, right? We don't talk about Jerry Rice's rings. We talk about Jerry Rice being the greatest receiver of all time. We talk about the numbies, and we talk about the on-the-field play. So it's the same with edge rushers in that way. I'll say this for Myles Garrett. I think if you're him, you go to sleep at night and you say to yourself, you know what? I will be still thought of, if I could stay healthy, as one of the truly great players that ever played this game. And I don't have to move my family. I have now generational wealth that that you just can't even fathom when you're 10 years ago when he's trying to make it to this league. I think he's sleeping pretty easy. Can I quickly say in the Kenny Pickett move, because I'm sure we don't have that listed anywhere else.
No, we don't.
Is that I'll say this, it's a great idea for Cleveland as a bridge quarterback. I think Cleveland now, it gives them the ability to draft whoever they want to draft a quarterback, and then say, we don't have to start you week 1. We can ease you into this, and we can throw Kenny out there and have a guy, because Deshaun's not going to be ready for week 1. And DTR and Jameis Winston just outstayed their welcome. So at least it's a fresh face for the fans to boo out after they're 0-3 through 3 weeks, and he's thrown 1 touchdown and 6 interceptions. You know what I mean? And then
it's a low risk move.
Then you put the rookie in, and it's fine. And if you're Kenny, look, you get a chance to start. And like we saw with Justin Fields earned himself a giant contract because he got a chance to start. He wouldn't have got that number in money if he didn't get the chance. We'll talk about Justin, I'm sure, here in a little bit.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So that will kind of launch us then into Monday, which began that legal tampering period where we could start talking, where basically free agents and or trades can be discussed and agreed upon verbally, and of course reported and leaked out to the press. And Monday was a whirlwind of a day. I guess you could say the first big thing that happened going into Monday, so late on Sunday, going into Monday, was that the announcement of the Steelers trading for DK Metcalf and then subsequently signing him to a 5-year, $150 million contract. Really big contract, big money for DK. The trade saw the Steelers give their second-round pick to Seattle and then get a 6th-round pick for their 7th as well. So a high price, and they paid a big price then for DK too. I think Pittsburgh, Mark, was a little sick of all of these rookie contract receivers and developing them well and then having to ship them off because of issues. We saw it with Chase Claypool. We saw it with Deontay Johnson. We're now apparently seeing it with George Pickens. And so I think they saw a guy that had George Pickens' talent, but has done it and been a professional for the most part across his career. I mean, a lot of people think of DK Metcalf as a volatile player, and he is on the field, but he's not an off the field problem. He's not a locker room problem guy.
He's actually a pretty cool guy, chill guy. As far as all accounts from the media stuff that I've seen with DK.
And he does fit the mold of what Pittsburgh likes, which is the big body type receiver that can block and have that big splash play ability. He's clearly made in a lab. He fits George Pickens. Like, they're both very similar players, right? So the pairing is interesting, and that's why I'm curious to see what happens with George Pickens moving forward, if they try and trade him to get that 2nd-round pick back and maybe even more, or if they just say, we're going to ride it out this year with these two and have a pretty, dominant 1-2 on the outside that's going to be really hard to defend. But, my instant reaction was kind of, I think Steelers Nation largely is really stoked about it. I wasn't super excited as I maybe thought I would be. And maybe that's just because I don't know if I view Metcalf as a top 10 receiver. He's getting paid essentially like a top 12 guy right now. Or top 5, I believe, actually. Now that'll get, moved once T. Higgins and Jamar Chase end up getting their contracts eventually. But I just didn't view him as that. And so I was like, is that really worth it? But I'm happy that they at least have a receiver for the foreseeable future, and they have some now room to do what they want with George and in the draft. So from that aspect, I was pleased to see it. I thought that meant we were going to have some interesting moves come on Monday, which didn't happen. But your initial thoughts on that signing and the fit in Pittsburgh?
My initial thoughts was it just seems weird that Pittsburgh, the team that drafts wide receivers maybe better than any team in NFL over the last 15 years, 20 years, says we need to go out and get a giant free agent, trade for a number one guy. It didn't feel like it was going to be Pittsburgh involved with the DK Metcalf thing at all. So that was shocking. Number 2 is, I think George Pickens is the real loser in this. He lost all leverage he had with the Steelers. He was their only weapon. And he could be like, guys, you got to pay me. You got to extend me. You got to feed me the ball. I'm the only guy here. And now he quickly becomes the Robin to DK's Batman. For multiple reasons. DK physically is your number one. DK's, in my opinion, the better receiver. And DK,
I agree with that too. And there's been speculation about that, but I agree with you on that one.
And DK's been in the league longer and has proven it at a higher level for a longer period of time. What is interesting now to me is what the Steelers do with the quarterback position, because I think that'll give us the answer on what they do with Pickens or trading him or keeping him. Mm-hmm. Listen, I know. You want to get value for guys if you're not going to keep them. But also, it feels like Pittsburgh is still in this kind of, the window is open. If we can figure this out, you don't want to lose Pickens to build for the future when you don't even have your future quarterback in the building. You know what I mean? And I know then it's like, well, what do you let Pickens walk next year and just not get anything from him? That's a tough pill to swallow. But if it means you're going all in this year, and that means an Aaron Rodgers or whatever it might be to go all in, then I think you run that risk. And also you could say to Pickens, you might franchise tag him. You might be able to sign him to a nice deal depending on the type of year he has. If he has a really productive year, but obviously not like number one money, then you look at some of the other number 2 money wide receivers in the league and say, hey, we'll offer you this because this is what we think you're worth. And if you really don't want to sign it, fine. Good luck on the market. as a kind of diva wide receiver who now isn't even putting up number one numbers. So I think Pittsburgh gained all the leverage with Pickens. I do agree. I think they could probably get about a second round pick for Pickens.
Which is what they paid for him. So at the end of the day, I mean, it depends on what you value.
I don't think I think it's worth going all in with this Pittsburgh team. They still have a ton of talent. They still have star players on defense. You have now really nice wide receiver room. You don't have Najee Harris in the building anymore to worry about that kind of like, oh, we got to feature the guy, right? We got to feature the guy.
Yeah.
You can spread the ball around to just the hot hand or the better players at that time. So I think there's a lot. Pittsburgh, all eyes on Pittsburgh for the next couple days and weeks as we ramp up to their quarterback situation. I think it's more interesting, the Pittsburgh quarterback situation than the Giants quarterback situation, because even though the Giants don't seem to be wanting to draft a quarterback, they're not a win now team. Pittsburgh, as we saw last year, this is a playoff caliber team. So this is a team that if they hit right in the next couple moves, should be right in that conversation again. And we all know what happens when you get in the playoffs. Anything can happen, especially if you now you feel like, hey, we got enough weapons to where we're not just a one-trick pony with George Pickens.
I mean, if they do run it back next year and Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson is the quarterback, which it certainly seems that that's going to be what's happening here next year, they are an instantly improved team in my mind. Like, there's no question about it. With DK, that is an instant upgrade to a glaring weak spot. Can I just address real quick? Because I did see Colin Cowherd make the point about, them spending all of this money on DK when they're, when they could have spent this elsewhere. Colin's also the one that has constantly lambasted them for spending their money on defense.
I know.
You can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, they just spent a bunch of money on offense in a big need. But to your point about them drafting really well, they have drafted well and developed receivers, but none of those in recent years have amounted to what DK Metcalf is, right?
Oh, I agree.
So like Chase Claypool was good and flashy at moments. They traded him away, got great capital, and he's out of the league.
Yeah.
Deontay Johnson, they made a really solid wide receiver. They trade him, get some capital back. He's, barely in the league. And so George Pickens might just be the next iteration, unfortunately, of this. So this is their way of saying, like, we can get a consistent developed product right now, and then hopefully, get that carousel of the number twos that we put together through the draft. So I think that's, overall their approach. And
if they trade Pickens for a second and then draft a wide receiver that complements DK really well in the second round, that'll that'll be Pittsburgh showing everyone we're done with the
really high on a quarterback.
Maybe
take a quarterback in the second round. Like, maybe
they do that. It would show to me we're done with the drama. And we again believe we can find another really good wide receiver. Like, we trust our scouts. So we're not going to credit to Pittsburgh. They have not given long-term contracts after the Antonio Brown contract to guys who are, problems. And so, they have, it's another reason why they have winning seasons consistently. It's not just the coaching. They do make solid front office decisions, solid draft decisions. You'd like them to make Super Bowl worthy draft decisions and front office decisions. But it's certainly better than when you look at teams like the Jets and other teams that just can't get anything going in either free agency or in the draft.
Well, I do think that they've been in a tough position too. Like, I don't know if I could have done a lot better over the last few years in terms of the quarterback position, because it's just, I mean, the last couple drafts haven't been great. There was one, and you have to trade an arm and a leg to even get into that, arena to draft those quarterbacks. So what I think, they lost a lot of players, unrestricted free agents. They're going to get a lot. They have a lot of comp picks right now for next year. They have a third, a fourth, and 2 sixths. To me, that says capital to move up.
Yeah.
So if I'm them, if I do trade George, I might want to trade George for like
a 2026
picks, and maybe I can get a second and a fourth or something for him, because it's down the road in the future. Now all of a sudden you got a bevy of picks use that leverage and get yourself up there in what should be a better quarterback draft next year.
Yes,
for sure. So
the Arch Manning,
very interesting.
The Arch Manning saga begins. Yeah.
Right. So I'd be very excited to see what their plan is there. And once we get to, Justin Fields and stuff in a little bit, we can kind of revisit the quarterback conversation. But I did want to talk about, this was also an interesting move for Pittsburgh because, now that we look at it in hindsight's 2020, this was actually the biggest type of wide receiver blockbuster move they could have made, because Chris Godwin decided to stay with the Bucs on a 3-year, $66 million deal. And all reports are saying he left upwards of $20 million plus on the table to come back to Tampa Bay. So this shows kind of what he was prioritizing. We saw the Rams sign Davante Adams to a 2-year, $46 million deal. So at the end of the day, Pittsburgh still got, a blockbuster deal when other things were already kind of in the works elsewhere. But
yeah,
great get for the Bucs. Smart move to keep this team in the band together. Clearly, Chris Godwin likes what they've got going there with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. And this was smart. Chris Godwin could have gotten the bag elsewhere on a shitty team somewhere and been the true number one. But I think he realizes his value is best maximized when you have a Mike Evans and when you've got this structure. And it is a good deal.
It's not like he took a 1 year, $12 million. It's still a really nice deal. And he, we forget, like, put yourself in those guys' shoes. What if that extra $20 million left on the table was a California team or was a New York team? And you're looking at the state taxes versus Florida, and you have to move your family. And so I think in order for a lot of guys to make that giant of a move, I mean, there's no way. Davante Adams probably already has a house in LA. He's a Southern California guy. You know what I mean? Sure. Even though he's playing, he played in Green Bay, but you think he just spent all his time in Green Bay? No. I'm sure he spent his time in California. So for a guy like him to say, yeah, I'll go back to California, like that's nothing. And it's a really good deal. I think it's a great move by both teams. The Bucs have been to the playoffs, 5 straight years, the 3 with Brady, the 2 with Baker.
Wow.
This is a team that sneaky has just been putting together a really good half a decade with a Super Bowl win, multiple playoff runs, multiple playoff wins. And I know they're going to be doing it now with the 3rd OC for Baker Mayfield in 3 years. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, it helps to have your guys there to help kind of navigate the changing of the leadership. And for the Rams, Davante Adams, I think it's one of the best signings to come.
Really good.
You have Puka is your one, and now Davante can come in there, and you're not with Aaron, so it's like you just play into the system. You're with a brilliant offensive mind in McVay, who's going to help utilize you to your absolute peak. And you're with a guy in Stafford who's on this short window like you, who's like, dude, we just got to go now. Let's win now. And for, again, to me, a Rams team that ended the NFC as the second best team in the NFC last year, you trade out Cooper Kupp for Davante Adams when Cooper Kupp has been pretty much a no-show since his Super Bowl MVP. This is a huge, huge deal. And Davante, I think it'll give him renewed life. I also think being away from Aaron, but in a good situation, not with Jimmy G, you're going to see Davante have, I think, a pop season next year. I don't know what he does in the second year of this deal, but I have a feeling you're talking about a Davante Adams that's 1,000 yards, 10 plus touchdowns, and just a rejuvenated year. And so
is this the best wide receiver duo in the league?
Adams and Puka? No, I would still take Chase and Higgins.
I
probably would still take Jefferson.
Evans and Godwin is good.
I probably would still take Jefferson Addison because Davante is.
It's close though, right? I mean, it's
different. People forget Puka's. You sleep on Puka. Puka's a top 5 guy. Like Puka's
he's really good.
Yeah, that's a good question.
And they complement each other very, very well.
It's a good question.
I mean the Rams are sneaky good, and we still we haven't heard of what's going on with Cooper Kupp, so we don't know where Cooper Kupp's going to end up. But we know
today they are going to release him.
Yeah,
once the new year starts and like the money clears, they're going to release him. So good for and if you're Cooper, I think he'll wind up on a team and he'll do like an Adam Thielen type deal where it's like, hey, are you look at like an Indianapolis. You have, what's his name? Pittman. You can say to yourself, let's bring in a Cooper Kupp for these young quarterbacks who are inaccurate. Here's a guy that can maybe rely on in third down situations who's going to be in the right spot at the right time.
Seattle, I mean, they've purged their roster.
They need a weapon. So, they need a weapon for sure to help Sam Darnold. So I think two great moves. I'm glad you brought those up. Two great wide receiver moves for two NFC teams that absolutely should be considered NFC contenders.
Speaking of the Seahawks, they traded Geno Smith to Vegas and signed Sam Darnold to a 3-year, $110 million contract. So Sam Darnold gets his payday after that rejuvenating season in Minnesota. Pretty nice, sizable contract for Sam Darnold and a fresh start. But he goes there when they've traded DK Metcalf away.
Release Tyler
Lockett's, out. And so, they're going to have to build this thing up. And hopefully they have a plan in place, whether it's, in free agency to get a Cooper Kupp or someone else, and then in the draft. But Sam Darnold, big win there. And I think this Geno, I think that's good for Vegas, man. About as good of a steadying the ship type of signing that they could have had, because even a Sam Darnold to Vegas would have been a little up in the air and volatile. Geno's a very consistent performer. You're not going to get as many of the highs, but you're not going to get as many of the lows. So thought it was kind of a win-win. I'm just curious if Seattle can get out of Darnold what, Kevin O'Connell was able to get in a dome, and with that offensive system and Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, all of those weapons certainly help. So I'm skeptical on how this experiment's going to turn out for Sam, but I thought the Geno signing was really good.
Yeah, let me quickly say with Geno, I agree. I think it was a great trade by the Raiders. And again, it goes back to what we said earlier. They're just trying to say to themselves, we don't want to be an embarrassing fourth place. We want to be that fourth place team that's a 7-8 win team that upsets the Chiefs once a year and is hanging around, around Christmas Day, still that in the hunt graphic. And we're selling tickets and we get the energy back here with Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly, offensive coordinator. And for Geno and Pete, they know each other. And remember, after Pete left his first year, so last year when he was out of coaching, what did he do? He was a special advisor. He was still in the building. So he has this working relationship with Geno. So they're going to hit the ground running with Chip Kelly. And Geno's got weapons. I mean, the Raiders have weapons. They have the best young tight end in football. And I think they're going to go out there and find a way to add a wide receiver too. It wouldn't shock me if Tyler Lockett finds his way to Vegas and it's a nice little blanket for Geno. So I'm excited for the Raiders. They're my early best fourth place team pick. You know what I mean? In the division.
Yeah.
Now, as far as Seattle goes, I'm with you. I don't know what the ceiling for Seattle is, but this is a quality roster with a rookie head coach that had a really good rookie year. This is a Seattle team that has a sneaky good run game with really good running back. They have a nice tight end. They still have a number one guy in Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's just, especially at the end of last year, he came on and he's a stud.
Yeah. Took over for sure.
And so if they go out and add a weapon, right? Stephon Diggs is out there. If you go out and add a weapon, another weapon to go with Jackson Smith-Njigba, or you draft another weapon, their O-line needs some work, needs a little TLC. But Sam is big and strong and tall and mobile. Is he going to be Sam Darnold, the 14-2 Vikings MVP candidate? No. But is he going to put up numbers to where he's worthy of the contract? I absolutely think so. I think Sam learned a lot this year, and he doesn't necessarily need you learned a lot from a boss and then went on to the next job and still applied a lot of those things you learned, right? Even though the next boss maybe not as good as that boss, you're still saying, hey, I still have this in my mind as a work ethic, so I'm going to do that still. What's to say that Darnold's not going to still be able to carry that with him and what he learned? And I will say, to you, I pose the question, is he the second best quarterback in the NFC West?
That's a good question. I mean, I do actually think he's better than Brock Purdy, certainly.
I would agree,
but
he's not as good as Stafford. So Stafford's
definitely not as good as Stafford, and I don't think. I mean, Kyler Murray's better. Kyler Murray's a better quarterback. There's a lot.
He's an enigma.
And Kyler's biggest problem is just like, does he have the leadership quality to lead the group? By all accounts, Sam Darnold is well liked in these locker rooms, and so that there's something to be said for that. There's a chemistry that forms because of that. Yeah. Kyler doesn't seem to have that with his team, at least from the outside. But I think still from a talent perspective, like Kyler's more
Seattle's
talented.
A well-run organization over the last 12, 13, 14 years. So I think that Darnold's going into a situation that is very similar to the Minnesota situation. I got high hopes for Darnold. Right now, I would put him as the second best quarterback in the NFC West, just ahead of Kyler. And so I think it's a huge year for Kyler, and it is
a big year for Kyler.
Darnold has a lot of things he doesn't have to worry about that he's had to worry about the last 5 years of his career. He's secure, he's the man, and he's got the contract. You know what I mean? Like, he's got the memory bank that, dude, you did this in the NFL. You can do this in the NFL. So I think there's a lot of huge upside for Darnold, and I don't blame him for leaving for maybe a less perfect situation for a nice chunk of money. This is, again, $55 million guaranteed with what he's already made in his NFL career. This man should be more than set for life, generational wealth. So,
sure,
you can't blame a guy for doing that. It's the Baker deal 2.0, and so I got high hopes for Sam.
It's amazing that we went so long without really seeing these types of stories happen. And they are so rare in NFL history as well, of the quarterbacks that were picked high and started and then became essentially backups for several years before returning to form. And in recent years, we've seen it with Geno, with Baker, with Sam. It is just incredible. A slight tangent real quick on that note. I saw something, and I wish I could give credit to the individual who kind of like went through this, but they were talking about Rich Gannon. And I didn't know much about Rich Gannon prior to his Raiders,
that's like when we
epic season,
football.
right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I didn't know much about that, like, 2-year window where he was, like, a really good quarterback. I just thought he was a solid quarterback throughout his whole career. But in fact, he was really bad for, like, 12 years to start his career. And then at the age of, like, 35, he wins an MVP out of nowhere. And they were... it was actually, I think it was 37, maybe actually, even later. And they were saying basically they were trying to find what the comp would be for like 2025 for this to happen. Just think about how crazy this would be, because this is what happened essentially with Rich Gannon in the late 90s with the Raiders. That would be like if the MVP next year was Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah, like kind of a journeyman.
How unfathomable would that be? They were pairing up the same age, relative success, journeyman history. They both had very comparable careers. How crazy would that be? Like, we would be losing our minds if Tyrod Taylor won an MVP next year out of nowhere. And that's kind of what happened with Rich Gannon in the late 90s.
Remember, people forget in the 70s, and like you didn't trade guys. Free agency wasn't a thing. You had guys who like there's like a Cardinals quarterback who he's like, when you look at he was the starter for like 12 years, and like every year they were like, he was below 500 and threw like more picks than touchdowns. Be like, well, that's just our guy. That's the only guy that we have. And fans wouldn't blame the quarterback. They'd be like, we need to run the ball. Like, we can't run the ball. It's just a completely different league, and it's a completely different athlete that plays the position now, for sure.
Slight breaking news, not gonna knock anyone's socks off with this one, but DeAndre Hopkins is on the move. He has signed a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Baltimore Ravens, up to $6 million in incentives.
Okay.
So he is no longer a Kansas City Chief. He is there in Baltimore, which,
chasing.
Hey, if Baltimore for kicking the tires, cheap deal. Like I don't have any.
Bring him into camp, see what you can do with him.
Yep. All right, let's get to what we alluded to earlier. The Jets signing Justin Fields to a 2-year, $40 million deal with $30 million of it guaranteed. The Steelers were reported to have offered $30 million, with 20 guaranteed. So the Jets giving an extra 10 million guarantees, probably guaranteeing beyond year one, and up to, of course, $40 million there. I like this move for the Jets, and a new regime. They needed a quarterback that they could kind of work with, a locker room guy that they could kind of help build the culture with. I think Justin Fields is a great fit for that, and Aaron Glenn there. I was personally bummed that the Steelers weren't able to get the job done, but after seeing the money, and I can understand how it didn't work out and didn't happen. And we don't know if the Steelers were willing to match. And Justin just said, I would rather go to New York at this point and test it out with them. So we don't know what happens there. I would have liked them to have Justin Fields because I don't want Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers to be the quarterback next year. But such is life. That's what happens. And look, the Jets are kind of just starting over fresh, and they get a quarterback for, a short term while they can figure out their long-term solution at the position, while still maybe having a chance to, fight with this thing. So I like
this deal, the Geno deal, the Darnold deal. A lot of this is indicative of this year's quarterback class. It clearly shows NFL GMs are looking at this class and going, we don't think there's, by pick 10
starting capable guys.
There's one, maybe two in the first round. Then there's a lot of projects from there on out. And if you're the Jets, what this deal does for you is it allows you to say, our fan base is hyped. Our star wide receiver gets his college quarterback. So Garrett Wilson is hyped. He's excited to be a Jet again. And it allows you to say, we're only paying $30 million for our starting quarterback for 2 years. That's nothing in the NFL.
It's still,
it's nothing. And the Jets have a really good roster built around Justin Fields. It's, an improving offensive line, a very good defense. And if you're Justin, you say Garrett Wilson's the reason you go. That's the reason.
Absolutely,
And I think the other reason you go is the guy who's going to be your head coach, Aaron Glenn, is the defensive coordinator of the Lions who you tortured for 2 years. Just look up Justin Fields' games for the Bears when he was the Bears quarterback against the Detroit Lions. It was his best games when Aaron Glenn was the defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I remember he had a 65-yard touchdown run.
And if you're Aaron Glenn, you're looking at this guy going, I couldn't figure this guy out. And so I want him in my building to create that offense. And again, it makes your dude happy. And here's the thing. If Justin Fields starts 17 games next year, which he won't because he never started, he always gets injured. He'll tweak an ankle. He'll break a thumb like he did with the Bears. It's just what he does.
Yeah.
If he starts, let's say 14 games and he wins 7 of those 14, well, the Jets will be picking in the top 10 next year in a much better quarterback class, right? And then you say, well, you sent him a 2-year deal. Okay, well, then you just draft that guy who you want to be your guy. And you say, Justin, you're our guy to start the year, but so is life. I mean, it feels a lot like what the Colts are doing. It feels a lot like what the Pittsburgh Steelers are probably going to do, where you're just saying, you know what? We're going to plug and play for a year. Look, the Giants are going to do, we're going to plug and play for a year. Next year's quarterback class is really exciting. And so we're going to be all in on that. The upside for the Jets is if Fields does start maybe 15 games and wins 10 of them and leads you to the playoffs and has really good success with Garrett Wilson, you say to yourself, we don't have to draft a quarterback next year, and we have a quarterback on a 3-year deal who we owe him nothing after year 2. And so we're in a really good spot right now.
Wait, is it a 3-year deal or a 2-year deal? I thought it was a 2-year deal. I could be wrong, though.
Oh, it might be just 2 years. But again, so then after year 2, you either re-sign him.
But still with a lot of guarantees. So there's
So you have a ton of flexibility. I think it's
it was 2.
Justin, I love Justin. I'll be rooting for Justin.
Same here.
I think Aaron Glenn is the difference maker. I think this Jets team is going to be more well run. Does that mean they're going to win more games? I don't know. But I don't think they're going to look and feel as disastrous as the Jets have over the last couple of years. And so I'm excited for Justin. I'm excited for Garrett Wilson because Garrett Wilson is one of those, again, top 10 guys who we just don't talk about because he's just gets overshadowed. They don't win enough. He's not in big games, but he is a freak. He's so good. And I think him and Justin are have a chance to pop together this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't want to spend too much time on it because we did already discuss the Steelers, but just since we're talking about Justin Fields, the quarterback situation is back up in flux for Pittsburgh. Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers seems to be the avenue. I don't want to have to root for Aaron Rodgers, to be quite honest with you. So I guess I will reluctantly say, let's just run it back with Russ. The argument for that too is the continuity. Year 2 under the system. He already knows DK Metcalf. They have a relationship. You got 2 giant-bodied receivers who are great deep threats, and you've got Russell Wilson, who's still one big skill set right now is throwing those moon balls. On the flip side, Aaron Rodgers gets the ball out quick and can maybe attack the middle of the field more, which is what Pittsburgh's been missing for quite some time. So I get that aspect of it too. And a lot of people will say Aaron is a better overall quarterback right now than even Russ is. Do you have an opinion on who the Steelers should go with this year?
I mean, for me, for entertainment, for content, it's Aaron.
You want Aaron. Yeah.
I'll put it this way.
I also think he loves Tomlin. I think Tomlin really likes him too.
I truly think this. With Russ, they win 9 games. With Aaron, they win 10 games. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah.
I don't think it's a drastic difference, but I do think there's an energy and excitement. And if Pittsburgh finds himself in a playoff game with Aaron Rodgers next year, that's a really, I have a feeling there could be, he's still got a little bit of that boogeyman type feel. And I think he'll be
He finished the season playing really well the last 5-6 games.
Because I think his body finally was healthy enough. And so I don't want to watch Russell Wilson play football anymore. So I'm out on that. But I do agree. I think there's a lot of positives for Russ coming back. It's not a terrible situation for Pittsburgh to be in. Except for the fact
it's just about what's the cost. Like, is Aaron really going to try and leverage this Giants play so much to where he is trying to get $40 million this year? I don't think you can justify paying that for a bridge quarterback. I'd rather tank if it's paying $40 million to either one of these guys. I would rather
what if it's just 1 year, $30 million guaranteed to Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, then that's fine. But if we're talking $40 million this year, and even if they can get out of it, I would rather spend that money on guys that you can get in here for longer.
There's still some holes.
Although I don't know how much pool is left out there to be had, anyways.
Yeah.
But it's that's a tough. You could add Justin, essentially, potentially for $30 million. And you're going to go with Rodgers for 40. I don't, in 1 year for 40, like that would rub me the wrong way a little bit, but we'll see. I want to talk about your Bears, man.
Oh yeah.
Bears, talk about upgrades in the trenches. Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, Drew Dahlman, got Dio, Odeyingbo. I forget how you say his name.
Dio.
Hey, Dio. And then you got Grady Jarrett, who's, maybe he's not what he used to be. He's 11th year in the league.
He's a veteran leader.
But he's a really solid player. I mean, really good force up front. They are fortifying the defensive and offensive lines there in Chicago. I like it.
Ryan Poles said at the end of the year conference, one of the things that he struggled with his talent evaluation versus like personal evaluation. He was frustrated that he's like, we don't have the leader, right? Like we don't have the voice to be like, oh, I got to fucking listen to that guy. I'm going to listen to that guy. And when you add Joe Thuney and you add Grady Jarrett, immediately now there's no more bullshit. Like there's no more leadership councils. There's no more, no. Those are your leaders. Those are guys who have been through it all. Those are Hall of Fame players who are going to come in there and you follow their lead, right? And I love that for the Bears. Here's what I also love about a lot of the Bears moves. Dio, Grady, there are 3-year deals. What's with Caleb Williams? It's basically you have a 3-year window. You have a 3-year window with your rookie quarterback. So all of these deals are 3 years deal. Dahlman, 3-year deal. Dahlman is a great find Dahlman is a top 5 center. He's 26 in the heart of his prime, and you're paying for 26, 27, 28, 29, like the heart of the prime, right? And and the other thing the Bears have lacked is they've done a lot of like, this guy can play guard and center. No, Dahlman is a center. And Dahlman is a guy who's going to come in there and call that with Thuney, that veteran leadership together. Jonah Jackson is a mauler. He's a man-child. Jonah fell into 2 issues in LA after leaving Detroit. Injuries, and they tried to make him a center. And he's really more of a guard, and he's a mauler. And so the Bears can say, you're going to go back to guard. Now it's the opposite side guard because we just traded for a Hall of Famer in Joe Thuney. But we need you to stay healthy, and we need you to be a mauler at the guard. And he has played with Ben Johnson before, so he'll be able to kind of, if anyone can acclimate to the system quickly, even though he's playing in the opposite position, it's the guy who knows a little bit of the system. And listen, Braxton Jones is still now the weak spot as the left tackle, but he's a serviceable left tackle. He's an average left tackle, right? And then you have an ascending right tackle going into year 3. And so you, Darnell Wright. So this offensive line, major upgrades. Here's the thing. So what the Bears have done, a lot of people saying the Bears have won the offseason. The sad thing is this, you got to remember where we were in December. This is a team that lost 10 straight games. This is a team that completely collapsed because they didn't have veterans. They didn't have leaders, and they were bad on the offensive line. And besides Montez Sweat,
and badly coached.
Yeah, badly coached. And besides Montez Sweat, once Billings went down, they were young and inexperienced and bad on the defensive line. So they filled 5 holes with these trades and signings. But they have a lot of depth to fill still, and they still have a couple of places now they can improve. The moves allow you to take best player available at 10. So a lot of people talk about Genty. If you follow me on Twitter, I have not been clamoring for Genty. I've said it over and over again. If they draft Genty at 10, I'm not going to be angry. But I still think find your left tackle of the future at 10. Find your edge rusher of the future at 10. The Dio move is really cool because your DC Dennis Allen, who's not a great head coach, but truly one of the great defensive coordinators in the NFL, he's the same body type as Cam Jordan. And yes, you're overpaying for what he's produced, but again, he's 26 and he's got the body type, and you're paying for what you think is going to be production, 8 sacks a year, physical mauler like a Cam Jordan in a system that Dennis Allen is going to turn him into a guy that's worth the money you're paying, or probably going to be underpaid in 2 years from now. So you still need that opposite, like you still need another pass rusher. You still need probably another starting caliber guard and another starting caliber tackle. So the Bears, yes, they've hit on a lot of things. They filled a lot of needs. This team still has a ton of needs. Offensive and defensive line depth, they need to draft at least 2 offensive linemen and 2 defensive linemen. If they do that, because they're really solid in the back end, they're really solid at skill positions. If you draft Ashton Genty at 10, your next 4 picks in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round need to be 2 O linemen and 2 D linemen. If you do that and you take guys from big schools with high upside, then I'm a happy camper, because then you're saying to yourself, listen, there's going to be injuries, right? If Jonah Jackson has to miss 2 weeks, if Joe Thuney has to miss 2 weeks, if Dio or Sweat has to miss 2 weeks, because we know injuries happen, you've got young in your system guys with high upside who are high draft picks in the 2nd, 3rd round that you say, hey, these guys should be able to show up and show out. Or if you go in at number 10, say, listen, Braxton Jones, we really like you. You're going to instantly become the best backup tackle in the NFL because we're going to go get a stud left tackle at number 10 if they're on the board. How is that a bad thing? I don't know. Some Bears fans, you need Genty. You still have under contract 2 running backs, Roschon Johnson and Swift. Swift worked with Ben Johnson in Detroit, had a really great year in Detroit. We were all saying, why are they trading Swift? What are they doing? This is stupid. And then they drafted the kid out of Gibbs out of Alabama. And you're like, oh, okay, this now makes sense. So I don't think the Bears are like salivating about Genty. I think they're giving it serious thought, but I also think Ben Johnson.
If you believe he is the next LaDainian Tomlinson, which a lot of people are,
then you have to take
then
him.
You do have to take
and
him.
He probably won't be there at 10. Eval. He probably won't be there at 10 if you think that.
Well, yes. I mean, I guess it just depends on if everyone else thinks that too. But yes, correct.
So again, I love what the Bears have done. Listen, Grady Jarrett in that third year of the contract, they'll probably have cut him by that point. This is a 2-year get your culture right signing. Drew Dahlman should last 3 years. Dio should last and grow 3 years. Those are 2 cornerstone signings. You hope that Jonah Jackson is a guy that finds health and finds comfort in a position and is your starting guard for the next 5 years at that left guard spot, right? At that right guard spot. You hope Joe Thuney solves the left guard spot for 3 years, playing in an all-pro Pro Bowl level, and finishes off his Hall of Fame career. And you're say, hey, thank you for your service at the last couple of years of your career. And now we're in a good spot to find that next guard or whatever that might be. So you have 3 really cornerstone signings. Plus, you hope that Grady Jarrett is a culture setter. And then you try to make sure that everything else you do now in the draft is about the future. It's about finding guys who are going to be there for 5 years, for 10 years in this core, and growing in that way. So I like what the Bears have done. I'm excited to see what the Bears keep doing. I think the Bears don't need to be aggressive. The free agency now market is really, really dry. And so don't be stupid. Don't overspend. Let's make sure. I do love Kyle Juszczyk. I think that'd be sick to add Kyle Juszczyk.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I just think Ben Johnson would find some interesting stuff for him. He apparently still wants to play. But I think now the shift goes to the draft and the fact that you have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds in the top 75. Those 4 have to be hits, and they have to be people who will contribute day one, and they have to be people who you see pairing with Caleb and Rome and Darnell Wright as cornerstone pieces for the next 6-7 years. And I think if you're looking at that, you have to look offensive and defensive line trenches.
Hey, you said it. Options. That's what these signings have given the Chicago Bears. They have room to where they can take their top choice at 10 instead of having to think about roster building.
Right now, I don't think I'm not sitting here saying the Bears are going to win 11 games. I'm still so shell shocked from how poorly this year went. I'm not convinced of any of that. But I will say, when you look at the offseason overall, Dan,
we appreciate you, Parker.
Hey, Parker's our guy. When you look at what the Bears have done overall, how can you not be feeling really good? Virginia's passed, so that frees up, I think, just the energy in the building. We love Virginia, RIP Virginia, but let's be honest, there was a lot of things that they all had to do because Virginia wants her team run a certain way. You have the hottest offensive name coach in football. You got him. That's your biggest free agent signing still.
Easily.
And then you filled a bunch of needs with a bunch of guys who can absolutely contribute for the next 2 years. And again, I know we have to think 5 years from now. We all know in the NFL, it's now a 3-year window. It's 5, 6, 7. When you draft a quarterback, like the guy for the next 10 years, that's insane. That's an insane thing to say.
Doesn't happen.
You have to look at a 3-year window at max. Truthfully, a 2-year window. Look at what Washington did in just 1 year. Look at what Houston did in 1 year after 2 years ago. It's a turnaround league. I'm not saying the Bears are the next team to do that. I'm just saying they have done a lot of things that on paper seem really, really great.
Yeah. The one Panthers move that stood out to me was J.C. Horn, 4-year, $100 million deal. Obviously, it's a lot for the former first-round pick by them, but I liked it because to me, what it signaled was kind of a turning of the momentum in Carolina from we're just tanking, we're at the bottom of the league, we got to get rid of Brian Burns, we got to get rid of Christian McCaffrey, we're doing all this
good players,
offloading, to actually keeping really good players, paying them, and starting to solidify a foundation. And so Dan Morgan, a relatively new GM there in Carolina is starting to set the tone, and hopefully they're building something special there. Hopefully Bryce Young found that magic that he was looking for the first couple years. Now with Dave Canales, I just liked what this signaled to the team, and it tells the team we're serious about this. We're not just going to keep trying to acquire draft picks and continue a rebuild stage. We're now in the stage of let's get on a moving ship and get this thing steered in the right direction. So I really like the Horn signing.
Nailed it. I think the Panthers are in for a really interesting year. They have a big draft coming up. They don't have their second rounder because they still gave it to the Bears. Like they're still reeling from that.
They are
that
hurting.
trade.
Yeah.
So they have their first round. They have third round. Like they have assets. It's a big year because by the end of this year, they have to make a decision on Bryce. And so I know that JC doesn't directly affect Bryce's play, but you're right. The mood in the building should be, no. We need to start being competitive. And in order to start being competitive, you have to keep a JC Horn, a guy you drafted, and a cornerstone piece of your franchise.
Yep. Derek Morgan's next. We'll see if they're able to get something done there. Or Derek Brooks, excuse me. Yep. Get something done there. Laramie Tunsil in a weird move. I don't know what Houston's doing. They traded him to the Commanders. They also got rid of their guard Kenyon Green, who they spent a high draft pick on just a couple years ago, but they did get CJ Gardner-Johnson in that trade from the Eagles. So they upgrade their secondary, but two of their starting linemen on the move, including one of the better left tackles in the league, Laramie Tunsil. Did we see the peak for Houston in year one with DeMeco Ryans, and now are they setting themselves up for potentially a little bit of a downfall here? You know, we know Tank Dell is going to be hurt. We know Stephon Diggs is on the market. I don't know, man. That's
they have some holes. They have some holes.
They do.
I like, we got to see what they do. There's no more. I think they're in the veteran receiver market. I could see them take a flyer on like a Keenan Allen. I could see them, who's available. Look to that, right? But I also think it's going to be really important for them to draft their new starting left tackle and for them to really listen. The division is so, I don't want to be too critical. The division is so wide open, and like it just feels like it's still their division. Maybe they felt like, I don't understand the Laramie Tunsil thing, but the only thing it makes it feels like they feel really confident they can get a tackle in the draft they like, and they must feel really confident that he's about to fall off some sort of a cliff that they see coming, that someone that no one else does, right?
Yeah. Or just trying to get a bunch of money to make some big moves next year.
And picks, and they're gaining some picks, right? And maybe they know they have to sign CJ Stroud, and they do. So we talked about that. They're going to go early on that. And the thing you do then, if you sign your quarterback to a big deal, is you've got to get draft picks, because you've got to hit on 75 to 80% of those draft picks. And that's how you can really sustain a high quarterback salary and still high production, like the Rams have done. The Rams, give them so much credit. I still can't name like two Rams starters on defense after Jared Verse, but it's a really bleeping good defense, and they've just hit on picks, and while they're paying Matthew Stafford. So that's maybe what Houston's thinking, that they're now in that realm and starting to save up that money and that cap space for their star quarterback. Otherwise, the move just doesn't make any other sense to me. And it doesn't make a ton of sense, maybe even with that justification, but there's my justification. You know what I mean?
With the Minnesota Vikings, I feel very similarly to the discussion that we had about Chicago. Fortifying defensive line, getting some really, really talented players on the offensive line. I was impressed with what Minnesota did. Yeah, we don't know how JJ McCarthy is going to be, and that's going to be the big determining factor of their success. But they get defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, 3 years, $60 million. They get Javon Hargrave, the Grady Jarrett type of signing. Maybe not as, prolific as Grady Jarrett, but still the veteran guy there. Will Freeze, the guard, Ryan Kelly at center, and then the cornerback Isaiah Rodgers. making a lot of moves there in Minnesota to do what they can to get JJ McCarthy protection. They really needed that defensive line help. And, I won't be surprised if they go defensive line with their first pick, given that it's such a rich defensive line draft as well. But they're building in the trenches. They're doing a lot of what they should do to help JJ McCarthy, who already enters his first year as a quarterback, real first year as a quarterback, with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison already there for, him to play with. So, I thought that some really good moves from them.
Yeah, we have a lot of time to speculate on JJ McCarthy, and I have.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I have thoughts on it, but I'll just say this: from the moves they've made, as a Bears fan, it sucks because I feel like Minnesota's the vulnerable team because McCarthy's the question mark, right? Packers aren't going anywhere, and if you notice, the Packers have been pretty damn quiet during all of this. That's because they don't need to add a ton. They're young. They have guys locked up. The next year's a year you'll see them make a little bit more moves because they'll either have to make some decisions on some of these young guys. You haven't seen Detroit make a ton of moves because, again, they don't need to. They have holes filled. So for Minnesota to go out and just drastically improve their defensive line, which was their biggest need, and to make upgrades to the offensive line that are a bunch of two veteran good players. Their prime is past Ryan Kelly, but he's a really good player. And again, what's your best friend for a young quarterback? A center who knows what they're doing and a run game. They re-sign Aaron Jones and they get a center who knows what he's doing. That's obviously going to be a huge addition for them to say, we're giving you what you can do. You already have the best wide receiver core in the NFL and a top 10 tight end. Now we've given you a run game and a veteran center. Kid, you got no excuses to not be productive in the NFL.
Just a couple other things to touch on here before we close out the show. Josh Allen, you mentioned, was extended 6-year, $330 million, $250 guaranteed, and Josh Palmer heads over to the Bills too. I thought that was a really sneaky, under the radar kind of get. This was a team that, outside of Amari Cooper, who when he came there was kind of a flashy name, right? That we're like, oh, look at that acquisition, that'll help a lot. Keon Coleman was young. Khalil Shakir really, this was a grouping in Buffalo of the kind of the Swiss Army knife gadget type of receiving core, not the absolute star-studded that it used to be, or that we've seen on other teams like Minnesota that we just mentioned and elsewhere. Josh Palmer fits into that really well. He's a role player that can do the job of stretching the field for you while Shakir is underneath. Coleman, that's the guy that you want to develop over the years. So I thought this was really good. He's going to make some big plays for Buffalo.
No, they go 4 deep now with Amari Cooper, with Shakir, with Coleman, and now you add in
Josh Palmer.
Josh Palmer. I want to keep saying Van Jefferson. I'm like, it's Josh Palmer. And so absolutely, this now was a position of weakness a year ago. We were like, who the hell are they doing? And they draft Coleman. You're like, okay, well, good luck. Now the wide receiver core for Josh Allen is extremely versatile. Veterans mixed with young guys. It's a special kind of group. And you add Kincaid. When you have to cover those 5 guys at some point in time early in the season, I don't know what teams are going to do. Then you start to worry about Cook and Allen running out of the backfield when you're spread out 5 wide. That's a great signing for Buffalo.
Yeah.
It really is. You have to respect Palmer over the top. Coleman is developing into an over-the-top guy with a big body. Amari Cooper is an electric possession receiver who can still make spectacular catches. And then Shakir is everything underneath, and he is going to just drive you crazy because you can't hit those little guys over the middle like you used to, Ray Lewis. So it's a really solid signing for Buffalo. And again, I think Buffalo was smart to sign Allen after the MVP. They just bought themselves 3 years of not having to touch the contract. And if Josh kind of yells at them about the contract, be like, dude, we just did this. Like, take a breather. We'll get back to you. So even if Josh Allen wins an MVP the next 2 years and a Super Bowl, they don't have to touch the contract because they touched the contract. So I think it's really smart for them. And again, when you add on years and you add on guaranteed money, all it does is help you get more flexible with the cap. That's how the cap becomes magic in the NFL. when you're not paying your quarterback, or if you're paying your quarterback over 6, 7, 8 years like the Chiefs and the Bills. And so then all of a sudden you can kind of just move money around. Now, eventually everything will come home to roost. We're seeing that with the Saints, but you can keep finagling it as long as that player is still playing with you and for you.
Yep, absolutely. I'm going to rattle off a few things and we'll get thoughts on it. Josh Sweat goes to the Cardinals. Khalil Mack back with the Chargers, an $18 million deal for 1 year.
I wanted Mack.
Lions signed cornerback DJ Reed. So that helps fill a need there. Najee Harris goes to the Chargers. The Colts signed Daniel Jones to back up or compete perhaps with Anthony Richardson. And the Dolphins get Zach Wilson, who may very well end up having to start some games if recent history is any tell.
Good signing by the Dolphins.
Miami.
I think that's a good signing.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, look, you got to have, some.
They're both small
there,
guys.
Clearly,
it's kind of they're both kind of squirmy, mobile guys. I think he fits like the type.
And he fits Miami, right? He fits Miami,
but he's got the cannon of an arm that Tua doesn't. So I think that I think it's a good signing. I think Najee Harris put the bet in now over 1,000 yards for the 5th straight season. I think the Chargers are going to run him into the ground. 1 year deal. They're going to run him into the bleeping ground into Jim Harbaugh's system. I also think smart for the Chargers to keep Mack. Mack was very good last year. And for Mack to just get 1 year and that money just guaranteed, I think that was nice for him. I think there is a signing you didn't mention that I think is a dumb one. It's the Chase Young signing in New Orleans.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Saints, that's a lot of
years.
money they paid
him.
He
played well, but it's a lot of money, a lot of years. And I also think the Sweat signing in Arizona is the signing that will it shock you in 2 years from now if they cut him? Like that's like the one, the Sweat.
Right.
Sweat benefited a ton from Jordan Davis and that defensive front, Jalen Carter, Brandon Graham
opening up a lot on the outside, right?
Lot. Now I get it. Arizona's got a defensive coach and scheme, and she say, "Hey, we're going to bring him in." I will just say this: I'm really glad as a Bears fan I didn't see the 4 years, $80 million Sweat to the Bears. Sweat would have been cool, but I think that he's ripe for the person in this signing that's like, he's looking for a 1 year deal or a flyer in 2 years from now. There's always a couple of those guys, and I think Chase Young and Sweat could be those deals for sure.
Yeah, no, you're probably right there. 3 years, $51 million deal for Chase Young, by the way, up to 57 with incentives. Final thing I'll touch on real quick, the 49ers, they lost a lot of players, and they didn't really add much. So no Debo, no Kyle Juszczyk, Hargrave, Malik Collins, Dre Greenlaw, Charvarius Ward, Talanoa Hufanga, Aaron Banks, Jalen Moore, and Elijah Mitchell all out the door. So
and
they're
Brock
getting comp
waiting for his
galore.
contract.
But
yes, so they're the opposite of full house right now. They're empty house. They are. Listen, we knew this was coming, right? Their time has come home to roost. They were on a magnificent 5-year run, and now you have to trust your GM and your brilliant head coach to plug and play more guys. You get Saleh back as your DC, I believe, right? I'm not making that up.
You know what? I need
and so you're going to trust your system. You're going to trust your scouts, and you're
correct.
You're going to. They have a bunch. It's the first year since the Trey Lance trade. They have like a full bevy of picks, and I think that they're looking to do what the Rams did: get young, get cheap, because they're still paying high money to Bosa, high money to Williams. And I do think also this is a sign. They're paying high money to Ayuk. This is a sign to Brock Purdy. We're not doing business like we used to do business. And I think truly the Niners should offer Brock Purdy 5 years, $40 million a year. And I wouldn't even hate it if they did at $40 million a year. It's all fully guaranteed. Just $200 million, fully guaranteed over 5 years. Give a bunch in signing bonuses, spread thirds around. For $40 million, he'd end up being like the 15th, 16th highest paid quarterback in the league. But the 200 guaranteed would be the third highest guarantee behind Allen and Deshaun. That way, it's kind of a win-win, right? You get your money. but you give us flexibility still in the cap to make moves and to build. We're not paying you 55 or more. We're not doing that. But we'll guarantee you on a longer deal if you stick around and stay around. I don't know what the terms are they're actually looking at.
That's a lot of guarantees, though, I feel. Like,
but Brock, but I feel like Shanahan and Lynch will look at that and say, I can guarantee we get Brock Purdy to be a 10-win quarterback at least every one of those years.
Well, that's
you know
true.
what I mean? So, like, if you're confident in yourself and you're confident in Brock in that regard, again, the next year, this year, I think is going to be a year where you see the Niners be in that wild card hunt and maybe sneak in if they hit on draft picks, and then in a year from now, we're looking at a Niners team that will spend in free agency, that'll be aggressive, and they'll be right back in there if they have Brock Purdy on a really smart deal. If they have a dumb deal with Purdy, they're in trouble. They're in real trouble. And I think they know that. I really think they know that. I do not expect a Brock
John Lynch
Purdy.
knows what he's doing.
I do not expect him to get more than $45 million a year from the Niners. And if they do, then my thoughts on the Niners will never change. They ain't winning nothing. Doing that. No. They ain't winning.
You need some money to you need money to make money type of thing. You need actually have money to do what you want to do in the NFL, which is grow your team, develop that depth, and continue to be a contender. So we'll see what the 49ers do. They obviously have a ton of comp picks next year from what they lost this year as well, which will help them down the road. But we could take a breath. We got through free agent frenzy episode, which is going to be crazy.
We didn't touch on, but I think by this time next week, as the dust settles, there'll be a couple more big moves to talk about. And
most definitely.
And then we're towards the end of March and we're a month away from the draft. And so we'll have to start turning our focus to that, because that's what the NFL will force us to do, because the free agency will have died down and all the focus will go there. And I know we mentioned the quarterbacks a little bit in the draft. This is a draft that's deep in a lot of positions. Running back being one of them, wide receiver being another. And there is some real talent on the tackle position and the defensive line position as well.
Yeah. No, there's a lot to pour through for this draft. A lot of top end talent too. I mean, the first, couple rounds, you could find a lot of first rounders. And then, as you mentioned, tons of depth into several rounds. A lot of people mocking draftable players that will go undrafted. So more than most years at that. So I'm excited to see kind of where our conversations go from that perspective. We have a lot more to cover where that's concerned here in the next couple weeks, but this has been a fun one, recapping free agency. As Mark mentioned, we'll have more to talk through next week, but that'll do it for us here on the Football Lounge for this week. We are part of the For Fantasy Sake Podcast Network. We appreciate everybody tuning in. I always screw it up. For Frequency Sake Podcast Network. For Fantasy Sake QC is the show. And we've got plenty of other.
It's their fault. It's their fault.
It's their fault. They did this to us, and I will never let them live that down. We appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you so much. And we will be sure to see you here next time.
This has been a For Frequency Sake Podcast Network production. For more great content, subscribe to For Frequency Sake on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.